Welcome to the Team Teach podcast. I'm Clare, and in each episode you'll find me talking with an expert guest to learn more about behaviour. We squeeze a lot into each episode. You'll listen to the latest thinking in behaviour, continue your professional development with our book recommendation, and then I'll send you away with 3 practical tips you can use in your setting. I'm joined today by Dean Cotton. Dean worked for 15 years in early years, followed by social emotional mental health, where he trained staff in Team Teach training, resulting in 95% reduction in behaviour incidences and 0 exclusions. Dean completed a master's degree in teaching and learning and then founded Positive Behaviour Strategies Limited, who provide training and consultancy in behaviour management. Dean also then founded in 2021 Behaviour Smart Ltd, which is a unique incident reporting system that reduces incidences and improves behaviour. And today, Dean and I are talking about rewards versus bribes. Enjoy the episode. Hi Dean, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Claire. How are you?
I am very well. It's really nice to see you this morning. It's been ages. We have worked together. I always like to be transparent on the podcast with people that I know, but I'm really interested in the topic. It's been in my diary for a while where we're talking about rewards versus bribes. Just before we delve into the topic, could you let us know what you know now about the topic that you wish you'd known then?
Yeah, I think when I worked in education, I used rewards every single day to get children to do what I wanted them to do. And the more research I've done on the topic, I've now come to realise that sometimes we may cause more problems than we're trying to solve by using rewards, especially overusing rewards.
So through experience, you've sort of realised that rewards weren't necessarily the most helpful.
Absolutely, and the more research I've done, I've discovered that actually in a lot of cases rewards are actually quite damaging.
That's interesting. I can't wait to let the lid off, because I've got quite a few thoughts around this and experiences as well. Tell us a bit about a book recommendation on the topic.
Yeah, well, I think the best book I've read on this topic is a book by someone called Alfie Kohn, which is called Punished by Rewards. And it was that book that really got me interested in this topic, because he said some quite controversial stuff and something that went against my natural beliefs and against my past practice. So, and what's really great about the book is that he points to evidence and research. So it's not just his ideas, there is evidence and research to back up his ideas, which I really enjoyed.
It's going to blow some people's minds though, isn't it? Even contemplating the idea that rewards are not necessarily, based on evidence in this book, the best idea. I think it can open up a bit of a can of worms, I think.
Yeah, and it to be honest, it did blow my mind, and still does sometimes, because I use rewards every day in my work and didn't see anything wrong with it. I saw children, I thought they were progressing, I thought they were getting better, and they were doing things that we wanted them to do. And then I saw the book, and the title I found really interesting, Punished by Rewards, and started to read that book. And I didn't believe it. I didn't believe some of the stuff that I was reading. But as I said, Alfie Kohn in his book does point towards evidence and research. So I got hold of the research that he was talking about and read that. And there's no argument, really.
If you work with parents and carers, our family engagement training equips you with the skills, knowledge and understanding to build positive relationships. Help your families understand and support their child's behaviour, recognise the challenges and opportunities in your organisation, and receive an exclusive range of resources you can use to practically support your families. Take a look at this exciting training option on the Team Teach website. So tell us about your experience, Dean.
Okay, so I worked with children with social emotional mental health, and the school where I was working shut down in 2005. So I went off to university, I did a master's degree in teaching and learning, and that gave me a passion because I started to research behaviour and try and get a better understanding of behaviour, and started to see that some of my practice in the past wasn't probably best practice. So what I wanted to do was share that information, and we do that through the training that we do. I also saw a TED talk by Sir Ken Robinson, where he talked about that we keep doing the same things and expecting to get different results. And he talked about how some schools were killing creativity, or the education system was killing creativity. And I started to see things from a different perspective, which gave me a need to sort of delve into education a little bit more. So I started to read quite a lot of research in behaviour and in education, and saw that things, there's a lot of things that we can do to improve the situation, but sometimes we're a little bit stuck in our ways. I wrote a piece of research on detentions, and we looked at where we removed detentions from a school for 3 months and saw a 64.5% reduction in behaviour incidents. But shortly after that research finished, the school went back to giving children detentions again. So I just found it really frustrating, and that we just keep doing the same things and expecting to get different results. And with the things like inclusion at the moment, lots of schools are struggling with behaviour, and they need good sound advice that's based on evidence and research, rather than people's gut feelings.
Yeah, those gut feelings aren't always accurate, are they? And I think you're right. There's so much that we can do in regards to behaviour using theory and evidence, which really leads on to the topic that we're talking about today, where we're thinking about rewards versus bribes. And intentionally, I think you've picked a topic that I think will spark quite a lot of interest. Tell me about that argument, rewards versus bribes, because it's such an interesting title. I think it's going to get lots of brains ticking.
Yeah, I think sometimes in education and care settings, we sometimes change the words of things to make them sound nicer. And I'm sure if we asked your listeners, do you bribe children? Most of them would say probably not. But, if I'm saying to a young person, you do this and you'll get this, or you do this and I'll give you this, then in my book, that's a bribe. Where a reward is something that usually comes after a behaviour. So, and it's usually unexpected. So, for example, my daughter once did really well in an exam that she wasn't expecting to do well in. So as a reward, we went out for a meal to celebrate, and that was the reward. Now, some people have said to me, well, that's the same thing. But in my book, it's not, because I didn't say to my daughter, if you do well in that exam, I'll take you out for a meal. So I think sometimes it's just the wording that we use, and we need to be a little bit more honest with ourselves. If we're saying to a child, young person, you do this and I'll give you this, then that's, in my book, a bribe.
And that's how really quite a lot of behaviour systems, whether that's education, care, are based on the system that we're describing here as a bribe. You do this, then you get this. So it's interesting that's like a foundation, isn't it? But you've mentioned in your book recommendation theory and evidence that discounts the idea that bribing, rewarding, well, not rewarding, because we're labeling that differently, aren't we? But that bribing kind of behavior from practitioners is not helpful.
Yeah, I think I'm not saying that we should never reward children, or I'm not saying even that we should never bribe children, because sometimes there's a place for it. I think that sometimes in a lot of services that I support, it's just overused, often with very little thought. And in the book, Punished by Rewards, and then the evidence and research that supports it, talks about that there is a place for that, but extrinsic motivation, i.e. in this case, the reward or the bribe, reduces intrinsic motivation. So the more we bribe children or reward children, the less likely they are to do whatever it is we're trying to get them to do in future.
Because having that intrinsic motivation means that it comes from self, as opposed to being motivated by the carrot in front of the donkey.
Absolutely. And there's a very interesting study done with a famous pizza chain where they developed a reading scheme. And basically, schools were sent a pizza-shaped stamp, and children went into the pizza chain and picked up a card that had a blank pizza on it. And the idea was that every time the child read a book, the teacher would stamp the card. And once they'd got 10 stamps on their card, they could take that back to the pizza chain and get a free pizza. So it was trying to get children to read more by offering them pizza, basically. And during that scheme, that promotion, children did read more. They split children into two groups: children that didn't enjoy reading and children that did enjoy reading. And the promotion showed that whether they enjoyed reading or not, due to this promotion, the children were reading more books. So everybody thought, well, that's great, apart from obviously the obesity issue, that children were reading more books. The problem didn't happen then. It happened later when that scheme ended. Because what they found once the scheme ended is that the children didn't enjoy reading, still didn't enjoy reading, but the children that did enjoy reading, a lot of them didn't enjoy reading anymore. They sort of said, well, if I'm not going to get the pizza for it, I'm not going to do it. And a lot of people at this point will say to me, but, this is part of everyday life. A lot of people, teachers, staff that work in services say, well, look, everyday life is I go to work and I get paid. That's just that's my reward for working. I ask those people often, what would happen if we stopped paying you then? And I'm sure a lot of people, obviously not you and I, Claire, but a lot of people would say, well, if you're not going to pay me, I'm not going to go to work. So it's reduced their intrinsic motivation to do what's right. And of course, getting paid for work it's part of everyday life and it's what we do.
But yeah, it limits intrinsic motivation. And I suppose people that enjoy things like volunteering or community work are doing that for intrinsic reasons to benefit themselves, benefit the community. And I suppose if we think about the individuals that we support, that's what we're trying to drive, isn't it? That intrinsic motivation to do whatever you want in the world and develop those life skills.
Absolutely. And there's so many studies that show that the extrinsic motivation damages intrinsic motivation. Yeah, there was another famous study where children were given 6 maths activities that they had to play with, and they got rewarded for playing with 2 of them. And this was quite a large scale study. And what that study showed is that the 2 that children got rewarded for playing with, they actually enjoyed the least. Even though those the 2 that they got rewarded for were mixed up in different services. So it weren't the same 2 maths activities in each service. They were all different, but they always enjoyed doing those maths activities the least.
There's so much in it. I mean, I'm not sure if this is exactly the same example, but an individual that I work with now cannot bear like false praise or praise for the sake of praise. So like someone sits down and they get praised for, well done for sitting down. And she's on the autistic spectrum and she absolutely cannot bear it. And some of the work that I've done with her is being very particular about any praise that I give her that's extremely specific and like deserves the reward of praise objectively?
Absolutely. I think praise is a reward,
Yeah.
and it's a verbal reward. And, I think with that, one of the things, I'm not saying, we shouldn't praise children, but I actually agree with your colleague that we need to be really specific and rather than praise, because, we do hear staff sometimes, and I've done it myself, as I remember when I worked in early years, I was walking down a corridor and a class of children were walking the other way in a nice straight line, and I said to them, "That's lovely walking, class 5." But what is lovely walking? What's lovely about it? Well, actually, they were walking down the corridor quietly whilst there were other people working. So what I really should have said is, "I like the way you're walking down the corridor quietly." So I think rather than rewarding or praising that sort of behaviour, or any behaviour really, we should look more at sort of specific acknowledgement. If you say to a student in a school setting, "That's a lovely piece of work, well done," well, it doesn't really mean anything. And so we'd be better off saying something like, "I really like the structure of that sentence," or something like that. So we're being really specific about it, because praise really is the verbal reward, or can be.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And some of the daft things that we all can come out with, I mean, I know I have, of just being so unspecific about what you mean, and you want to say something nice. Like, that's the root of why some of those empty bits of praise come out. I think sometimes focusing on the effort that someone's put in can be really specific as well. And I can see that you've put so much effort into that, that's amazing. But we can quite easily slip back into the empty praise, which, as you said, is a form of reward.
And I think that there's nothing wrong, with, acknowledging somebody's effort, or, but again, it needs to be tailored to the individual. Because, for example, if we've got a young person with a low self-esteem, and we said, "Okay, well, with all our children that we support, we're going to praise effort." For a child with a low self-esteem, that might be a really negative thing to do. I remember once saying to a child that I was working with who had a very low self-esteem, "You've done a great piece of work there. I really like that." And he said, "It's not great, it's rubbish." And he just ripped it up in front of me because he had a low self-esteem. And this is the thing, that when we're talking about, rewards or as a form of punishment, or a reward that reduces intrinsic motivation, we've just got to think about, which individuals do rewards work with? And when we say work, what I don't mean is it gets them to do what we want them to do. Because that's one of the problems with rewards, is they're almost instant. If I said to you, or just about anybody, "Stand up and sit down, I'll give you £100, people will stand up and sit down. So I could say, well, it worked. But the question is, when something works, what do we really mean? And from my perspective, what I talk about is, if something works, it has a long-term positive impact. So when we give that child a sticker for reading a book, is that going to have a long-term positive impact? And the research suggests not.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the topic. I wish we had longer, Dean, though, because now I'm thinking about the COVID lockdowns and then the rewards versus consequences kind of debate around that. But I'm going to go off on a tangent if I start talking about that. So, Dean, could you just finish the episode with 3 top tips?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first tip is to be honest with ourselves. Are we bribing children, or are we rewarding children? So is it a bribe that we're using, or is it a reward? My second top tip is to be individualized and carefully thought out, designed for the individual. And thirdly, acknowledge rather than empty praise. So acknowledge the behaviour you want to see rather than empty praise.
That's brilliant, Dean. And I think the episode as a whole is just going to open up some different ways of thinking for some staff members. So I think it's been absolutely fantastic. Thanks for coming on, Dean, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Team Teach podcast. It's been great to have you here with us as we discuss behaviour, communication, and the ways we can best support those in our care. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.